Welcome, everyone. My name is Connie Graf, and I'm with Linda Binns. And thanks for watching the replay, too. And whoever is here live, welcome, welcome. We want to talk about what is clutter. And this is my very first YouTube live. I uploaded a few videos, but never did a live. So welcome, Linda, to my very first YouTube live.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. I love you. As you know, I love chatting with you about stuff.
I know we seem to find all kinds of reasons how we can chat with each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm so grateful that you're here because it makes it a little easier to do a YouTube live when we have somebody to chat with rather than just the camera and the open space.
I agree.
Yeah. And so I want to talk about clutter, and the title also says, what is clutter? And it might not be what you think. So do you have any idea what I might be talking about?
Oh, I do.
Yeah.
Well, to me, when you mention clutter, we think of the stuff, the physical things in our space and how we want to get rid of stuff and organize and things like that. And having worked, or as I did work for many years as a feng shui practitioner, I know that the clutter itself, the physical stuff, is really just a symptom. It's a symptom of what's going on in here, what's going on in your life. And it's just the manifestation of that in physical form, really. So, and I know we've had conversations about this before, but it really is not about the stuff. It's just a small part of it.
Yeah, that's a small part of it. And I say often clutter starts in the head and it kind of resolves itself in the head too. But another thing that I also want to say that a lot of people may not realize this way is also that clutter are actually unmade decisions. Yeah. So it's actually whatever you don't want to deal with right now for whatever reason ends up being clutter. Now, whether that is physical clutter or it could be digital clutter, it could be even emotional clutter. So if we suppress our emotions because right now we don't want to deal with them, that's also unmade decision. Like in a way, it's an indirect decision because you make the decision to suppress it, but it will come back. It's not solved. And this is kind of what I mean with not making a decision. It's not you didn't make a decision to solve the dilemma or to make a decision about the physical item or the thought that you're thinking or don't want to think anymore. So yeah, that's why I'm saying it's unmade decisions.
Yeah, that's so true. And it's why people they wonder why, okay, they have a major decluttering session, they get rid of stuff and everything looks nice for a few days or maybe even a few weeks, and then they're back to the same situation again, and they can't understand why they cannot seem to maintain it. And it's because you're just dealing with the symptom. You're not looking at the cause of it, which is the unmade decisions, right? You're not addressing it on that level. And so just getting rid of the stuff is not going to do it. Usually it will come back unless you work on an inner level as well and address why you're doing this, why you're hanging on to these things, why you're postponing your decisions.
Yeah. And this postponing decisions is actually, so it's in a way mental clutter, which creates then all this other clutter. And it puts like you put this on your future self, so to speak, because eventually one day you will have to make a decision. Most of the time, when I work with clients, they have to make the decision because they want to move or they have to move. And then it's kind of like that way that now you have to make a decision. And it's oftentimes the worst moment to make a decision, because then often happens exactly what so many people are afraid of. They give something away that they later regret. But because it's such a frenzy, because moving is stressful, packing is stressful, so they may be so there's something like decision fatigue. They may be so tired of making decisions and deciding whether something comes along or not, that they're actually making wrong decisions. And this is why I feel it's so sad. If you would get into the habit of trying to be up to date with all these decisions and having as little clutter as possible, you make way more, that's not good English, you make way better decisions.
Right.
It has so many advantages, but you make better decisions and you regret less what this decision was. That's
and it's if you ask yourself, what am I not facing in my life? What am I putting off? What am I not addressing? And it could be as simple as, well, I say simple, it's never simple, is it? But you're in a job that you really don't like, and you've been in this job for a long time. And you're unhappy there, you're frustrated there, but you're not doing anything about it because maybe there's a fear of, oh, maybe I won't find something else, or maybe it won't pay as well, or I've got to start over. So then it comes down to, because what are you tolerating? And you might think, well, what's that got to do with the stuff in my house? Well, what will happen is, you're putting off that decision. You're tolerating a situation that is really making you unhappy. And then that will start to be reflected in your environment. It will exhaust you. You won't have energy. You'll start just postponing making decisions about your stuff, and that stuff will accumulate, and then you'll feel worse. And it all kind of adds to itself. Until you reach a crisis point. Tony Robbins says, I think it's Tony Robbins who says, when the pain of making a change is greater than the pain of staying the same, that's when you'll do something about it.
No, the other way around. If the pain to stay the same,
Wrong way around. And usually, like you say, we put it off until we're forced to deal with it. In the case of the job, usually people put that off until they're forced to deal with it because they've just been, the company restructures and they lose their job or something like that. And now they're forced to deal with it. It's the same thing.
And I think that is often the reason why you hear people later say, for example, in the example of the job, they say later, oh, it was actually a blessing that I was let go, because they knew before already that it wasn't right. And they didn't do anything about it. So the universe or the employer or wherever you want to believe in or call it made the decision for you, which is very painful in the moment. But later, again, in hindsight, you see that it was actually the right thing to do. And I hear this so often. Oh, yeah. And or I hear it also a lot when people then finally do let go of certain things. I just heard it again where somebody, like I said, when they have to move, then they start making these decisions. And in hindsight, she's saying, I don't know why I hung on to all these things. I feel so much better now without it. So, or they feel so much better without that job that was bugging them.
Right. Yeah, and we can actually tolerate a lot just because of the fear of change. And fear is a big... it has a big influence on us holding on to stuff. You mentioned, being afraid to get rid of something in case you might need it later. That is very often fear and guilt, I think, are very often powerful players in the reasons why we keep things, because we are afraid that the moment we let it go, we're going to need it. Or if a lot of the stuff we have, it comes from somebody else, perhaps a loved one who passed on or something like that, then we'd feel guilty if we let it go. But, you have to look at the reality. And I know you talk about this, if you're holding on to something and it is actually important to you, or think it's important to you, how important is it really if it's shoved in a box in the basement, and you haven't seen it for years, but I think that's often a reason why we hold on to things. It is that fear. But again, that is a postponed decision. It's you're putting off looking at what are the fears that I have, what am I really afraid of, and it simply manifests investing in the stuff that you have around you.
Yeah, and that's exactly when it keeps you stuck and almost keeps you hostage, because our subconscious for sure knows that all this stuff is still around. Our subconscious knows that all these decisions are not made, and it just becomes heavier and heavier. That's why so many people, when they finally get to the place where they either have to make a decision or they get themselves to make a decision, they feel so much better afterwards. We all have had that. And that's another thing I want to say too, is like, I'm not here to talk down on anybody. We all have some sort of clutter in our life. And I was just asked yesterday again whether I ever struggled with clutter. And I would say I may not necessarily struggle with physical items, but I sure struggle with mental clutter of all sorts, and I feel like anybody who says they don't, they're probably not telling the truth,
That's true. Yeah. I mean,
you all feel better once. And I mean, it goes in waves too. It's like, it's not always every day we're having a huge pile of mental clutter over here of decisions we have to make. It's more like there's maybe something important that we have to make a decision on, and we all know how this feels until we finally make the decision and then can let it go, how good that feels. And
if you take it a step further, I think I have found, when I worked with people as a feng shui practitioner. Now, I'm not a clutter expert, I'm not an organizing expert. My specialty is energy, and the effect that these things have on you, or the effect that energy is having on you, and the energy that you are putting out into the world, really. And so one of the things that I found helpful for me, and also with my clients, is to think about things in terms of energy, and the energy of something, and the meaning, the associations of something, which can help you understand why you might be holding on to something. And even more importantly, the effect that it's having on you. So I would say to someone, imagine if you went on vacation and you had a really wonderful time and you brought back something, I don't know, a memento, some kind of knickknack or a painting or something from that vacation. Well, every time you look at it, it's going to remind you of what a great time you had. It will uplift you, you'll feel good, it will take you back in your mind to that wonderful vacation. But now think of something that you're holding on to that reminds you of a really difficult time in your life, perhaps a really difficult relationship, or somebody who treated you really badly. But you're holding on to this item or several items. And even if it's not conscious in your mind, that's what that item energetically will represent for you. So every time you see it, every time you're around it, that energy is having that pull on you. That negative energy, if you like, of that situation or that person, or how you were treated or what went on. And I find that sometimes when people understand that, and then they start to look at the things they have, that can really help people to begin the process of letting some things go, because they didn't realize the impact those things are having on them, because it will keep you stuck. I lost count of how many people I worked with who went through really nasty divorces, and it had been several years now, and they were ready to move on, but nothing, they couldn't move on. And when I went to their home, I would find that I would ask them about some of the things they had, and they were all things they had from their marriage. It was like, well, I got this in the divorce, this was a victory. But what they didn't realize is how those things were holding them back and keeping them stuck in the energy of that old relationship, rather than allowing them to move forward. So that might help a little bit, if you start looking at your things in terms of energy.
Yeah. Now, of course, because I help people declutter, a lot of people think out of sight, out of mind. So and then that's when it happens that we stuff it in the garage or in the basement, or if you have an attic, it ends up in the attic. And so what do you say about that for energetic connections?
I don't care where it is. It could be in a storage facility like miles away. It's still your stuff. It's still having that impact on you. It doesn't matter whether you see it. In fact, if you're not seeing it, it's even worse, because you're really not willing to look at it. Well, I remember when we first moved from England to the US, and I did like most people do. I had, we didn't really know if it was going to be a permanent move or just a few years. And And so I had some things, I think, in my mother-in-law's attic, and, you know, some things that we left behind anyway. And then it wasn't until we went back for a visit several years later that I realized we still had that stuff. And what I realized for myself was like I was keeping a foot in both worlds.
Yeah.
You know, it was like, yes, we're here in the US and we know we're staying, and that's great, but we're just kind of holding on over here a little bit because we're not ready to completely let it go yet. And once I realized that, then I was, of course, willing to let it go. But often we do things like that without even truly being aware of it. And, you know, that was thousands of miles away, but I know it was still impacting my ability to really embrace life here fully.
Yeah, and I find it also so interesting, especially when you have stuff like this. After a while, you don't even remember anymore what it is. You for sure don't miss it, you know. But it's similar, like when people really have chock full garages or basements, they often don't have a clue what is there. And it sits there for months, if not years. And I always say, like, well, if you don't even know what it is, then you can just let it go, no? Because you obviously didn't miss it. You obviously don't need it, you know? Like, if we want to talk about what is clutter, clutter is first and foremost things you don't use and you don't love. And if you don't use them and you don't even remember that you have them, then it's for sure clutter, you know?
Right. I like to give people some questions like, do I love it? Do I need it?
Yeah.
Do I use it? Does it bring me joy in any way?
Yeah. And, also, when have you used it last? You know, when have you used it last? When are you technically going to use it next? Yeah. You know, and if you can't remember when you used it last, then you have no clue when you will ever use it. It's definitely clutter.
Well, and also I like, because I've moved so many times, I think I will also ask if I moved, you know, especially if I moved a few times, would I want to take this thing with me every time? Because every move, you know, and I've always thought I was pretty good during the moves, you know, getting rid of stuff before we moved, you know, really purging and letting things go. But every single time we get to our new place and I'd be unpacking, putting things away, and I think, why did I bring this? You know, so there was always something else I could let go of.
But I think this is also because we evolve, and you're in a different place when you're actually packing up in an old place. You're in a different mental space, in a different emotional space than when you're at the new place. So I think that happens all the time.
That's true.
It is that way. But what I feel like is, and this is where the circle comes back to the unmade decisions, when people are not moving or not as often moving, and the house is big enough. That's when the lure is so big to, just put it here. I have the room, I have the space, I can just have it. I don't have to decide now. And they think it's a good thing. Oh, I mean, I have enough space. No, it doesn't bother anything. Yeah, it does. That's where the danger is, no? And so moving is actually a good thing when we're moving more, because it keeps our life lighter.
Yeah, I think I've shared with you before that I used to, when we first moved to the US, we lived in St. Louis. We were there for 12 years, and the house we bought there had a basement. First time I'd ever had a basement. And it was like, great, lots of space to put things. This is really wonderful. And when we came to move from there, I was really shocked at how much stuff was down there, and how much, you know, there'd be something and you weren't sure quite what to do with it. You weren't quite ready to get rid of it yet. You didn't know what to do with it. Oh, we can put it in the basement. We've got the room. And so it became so easy just to put things there. And then when we came to move, looking at all that stuff, you just wonder, what was I thinking? Why on earth would I hang on to this? So if you don't have the space, then you'd be forced to make the decision.
Yeah.
Right. That you have to do something with it because you've got nowhere to store it. But when you do have somewhere to store it, it's so easy to just put it out of sight, out of mind, like you said, and forget about it.
One of my favorite shows are the ones where they help people find a new home or something. I forgot what the names are, but there's all kinds of different shows, British shows, American shows, no? And the biggest thing on the list, what the house has to have, is always like lots of storage. And people don't know. And I agree, we need certain amounts of storage space, but there's a balance. We have to make sure it's not too much, because then is exactly what you just said. it's so much easier to just push the decision off to a future time, to your future self sometime. And when we don't have enough storage, that's also not ideal, because then we have nowhere to go with these things, because it's ideal when you have a home for everybody, for everything, for everybody too, but for everything.
Well, yeah, and that's something I've learned. Everything has to have a home, and if it doesn't have a home, if you haven't got the space for it to have a home, then something has to go, you know. And I used to really struggle to let go of books, for example. I used to have bookshelves full of books, and so with all the moves, I had to let go of books, because those are heavy things to move with you every time, and each move it got a bit easier and easier to let go of more and more books. And you know, with something like that, and same with clothes, I have a rule that if I'm buying a new book, if I'm buying something new to wear, I'm going to let go of something. So I don't bring something new in unless I let something go. So you know, just even having a rule like that, I think is helpful.
Yeah, one new thing in, an old thing out, or you can even challenge yourself for a while and say, if a new thing comes in, two old things go out. You know, it's like, there's all kinds of games you can play with yourself, you know, or having rules.
Works, I think, you know, whatever works.
I don't like rules, so I have to call it a game. Otherwise, my brain is gonna rebel against it.
Yeah. Well, I just remember, especially with books, for example, I just remember how it is to pack those things up, to physically pick them up, move them, transport them, then unpack them and put them all away. And so it really, and when you've done that several times, you know, you really start to get a bit stricter with yourself about what's important to keep.
Yeah, but a lot of people have trouble with books, and even though most books we only read once, you know, it's like there might be some reference book that we reference back several times, but most books are literally, if they are all read, they're probably only read once. And
or give it to somebody else, you know, pass them around. And you know, I know several people who will do kind of book swaps, you know, where you trade books, or and that's a really good thing if you like books, you know, because you read it, you get what you need from it, and then you can pass it on to somebody else who needs it. Somebody can pass something on to you. So really, I think there are many ways like that we can, and just think about it. If you're holding on to something that you don't need, use, want, or love, there's somebody else who could really use that. And so you letting it go will not only help somebody else, but it's then going to create space. And this is something to really think about. Think about how much space is being taken up by things energetically that you don't want, because that also represents things energetically in your life that you don't really want, right? So it goes hand in hand. So when you let go of things, you are creating space for things that you really do want to come into your life. And I think that's a great reason to let go of stuff. You know, to create some space for not new items, but new experiences, new things to come into your life energetically.
Exactly, because if we don't make space, nothing new can come back in, can come in.
Yeah, exactly.
No. So to wrap things up, I think the from my side, the big message is that clutter is all unmade decisions, no matter whether we talk about physical, mental, emotional. There's even spiritual clutter, you know. And on top of it, like, that's why I love to have you on and chat with me, because you come from the energy place, and it takes up, it pulls on our energy, and it creates a stuffed environment, not just physically, but energetically mainly.
Yeah, and if you're wondering why you're exhausted, then look around at the stuff you have around you, you know, because just think of that having an impact on your energy, and ask yourself if you want that to continue to having an impact on your energy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so thanks so much, Linda, for coming on, for chatting with me, doing my first YouTube Live with me. Do you have any last words of wisdom or something do you feel like we haven't covered before we
Well, I think we've covered all the important stuff, but I think, really I would encourage people to start looking at the things around them in terms of energy and in terms of memories and associations. What does this thing mean to me? And see if you can identify one thing today that perhaps energetically is not having a good impact on you, that you could let go of.
Yeah, demands a certain awareness now. Like we have to slow down for a second and start checking in. How does it actually make us feel? Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, thanks so much. And thanks for all of you out there watching. If you have any questions around clutter or what we talked about, or what we could talk in the future because you have questions around it, leave them in the comments below. And I think we see each other again next week on your channel, don't we?
Yes, we're doing a YouTube live on my channel next week. Yes, we do.
Do you remember the title or the topic?
I think we're talking about the importance of self-awareness.
Yeah, see, that ties right into it.
Yeah.
That ties right into it. So that's why we're the perfect match, because without self-awareness, we actually have a hard time decluttering.
Yeah. And because a lot of times people have a difficult time with the concept of self-awareness, thinking selfish or something like that. But we're talking about it in a completely different light. So, love people to join us for that conversation. That'll be a good conversation also. Yeah, you find her on Linda Binns. So, here on YouTube. Yes. Okay, thanks so much. All right, thanks, Connie. Bye.